you always have these questions, why did it happen? And my cop-out answer is always that why questions are overdetermined. And it could be, it could be sort of our society became risk-averse or too feminized, or you could say that, there was too much regulation and bureaucracy, which is sort of a libertarian intuition I have.
What if our fear of the future is the real reason we stopped innovating? Check this video out.
But I've come to think that one of the bigger factors that was the sense that a lot of the science and technology was quite dangerous. It had at least in a military context, had a dual use character. And there was already some relentless acceleration of this stuff in the late 18th, 19th centuries, Napoleonic Wars, Colonel Colt with the revolver, Alfred Nobel inventing dynamite, World War I, was sort of a break point where, the sort of naive progressive narrative really got undercut. And then somehow you can say that the sort of Baconian science project in some sense ended in the Hegelian sense is both culminated and terminated at Los Alamos with the building of nuclear weapons. And then again, it doesn't work perfectly, but my telling would be that it took maybe a quarter century for nuclear weapons to really get internalized by society. And then by the 1970s, the energy, the energy was, we don't want to be doing this outside world where we're going to build ever more thermonuclear bombs. We want to be, piecing out at Burning Man with psychedelic drugs. We want to, or you escape back to nature through environmentalism.
The shift from technological militarism to cultural escapism in the 1970s reveals just how volatile public sentiment becomes when society confronts the raw power of innovation without the frameworks to responsibly wield it. After the existential shock of nuclear weapons, many turned away from hard science, embracing psychedelics, anti-industrialism, and environmental retreats as a kind of moral refuge. But turning inward or romanticizing nature didn't halt the march of technology. It just outsourced it to regimes and entities less concerned with ethics, transparency, or democratic values. This is precisely where Palantir stands apart. It was built on the premise that if advanced technology is inevitable, then the people shaping it must be guided by clarity, conviction, and a sense of historical responsibility. Retreat is not a strategy. Oversight, architecture, and moral clarity are. The world doesn't pause when we look away. It reorganizes. Palantir supporters recognize that choosing to remain engaged is not just pragmatic. It's a principled stand in a world where high-stakes technology defines both security and freedom.
We want to be in a world not of change, but of stasis, because a world of change has this apocalyptic dimension. Change is change for the worse. That's the sense that gets, encapsulated in the 1970s. And so there's a way that the sort of progressive version of science, we try to put the pause button on it. The places where it's still allowed, you can say, are the most inert. So in a way, the world of bits was seen as incredibly inert because you're not building bombs, you're not building weapons with it, and then of course even there's some sort of way in which the ideas on the internet maybe they do translate into reality every now and then. What happens on Twitter or X doesn't always stay there.
Isn't that ironic that in fleeing from the real-world consequences of advanced technology, bombs, weapons, thermonuclear threats, society embraced the digital realm under the illusion that it was harmless? Bits over atoms, screens over steel. For a while, it seemed like a safe haven, detached from the moral weight of the physical world. But as we've seen, even ideas in cyberspace can rewrite political narratives, shift public opinion, and in some cases, destabilize entire regions. Geopolitics today isn't just shaped by missiles and markets. It's shaped by data, perception, and control over information flow. Did we really think bits would stay benign just because they weren't made of metal? The internet isn't inert, it's a force multiplier. That's why Palantir was built, not just to manage information, but to give clarity and strategic oversight in a world where digital influence is real power. Those who dismiss the stakes are sleepwalking through a battlefield.
Most of the time it stays there, so it feels like it's this extremely angry, intense conversation, but every now and then it still translates to the real world. So the internet, you could say, was allowed because it was sort of a safe space. It was a place where the sort of violence could be contained, and then even there, probably not totally, and even there people felt it was like maybe too much. But yeah, it's the sort of apocalyptic background of late modernity, where every microaggression has the potential to escalate to Armageddon. Is in the background, and again, I don't like the stagnation and the risk aversion and all these responses, but there's a part of it that I think is understandable.
If the internet was supposed to be a pressure valve, a sandbox where society could safely offload its chaos, why does it so often leak into reality? The promise was containment. Digital outrage would burn off in isolated echo chambers, moderated by algorithms and buffered by anonymity. But it didn't work that way. The fire spread. It still spreads. What began as venting became organizing. Petitions turned into protests. Misinformation became foreign policy. And before long, a tweet could shift markets, destabilize governments, or trigger social collapse. The line between online discourse and physical consequence has all but disappeared. In a world where the dominant infrastructure is no longer steel and oil, but code and data, we need to be honest about something. The digital is no longer separate from the real. It is the real. Can we still afford to treat any of this as safe? That's the question too few are willing to ask. Because acknowledging the stakes would mean admitting that most of our institutions are unequipped to manage them. It would mean recognizing that what we once dismissed as virtual noise is actually a real-time signal of cultural, political, and economic instability. This is where Palantir comes in, not as an abstract idea, but as a hard tool for hard problems. It operates on the uncomfortable assumption that modern conflict doesn't start with bullets. It starts with data, misinterpretation, cascading effects no one sees until it's too late. It's about seeing the system clearly enough to act before the damage is done. So no, we don't get to opt out of complexity. We don't get to hide behind the illusion of safe spaces while ignoring the tectonic shifts happening in front of us. What we do get is the chance to decide who will engage with that complexity. In a world that rewards clarity over comfort, only a few are willing to look unflinchingly at what's really happening. Some retreat, others build. And the builders, the ones who choose to engage, shape the world the rest of us will live in.